from the Okay. Good morning, Nan. Sound check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Anyhow, I heard I have a geography class and on one side of me is Musgrave. The other side of me is Milton.
Yeah. They should be popping in anytime.
But yeah, it's Michigan.
Mhm.
And otherwise we can make that. But live now, I develop. So we, okay. Yeah.
And then I don't need.
Yeah. Okay. Good additions in it.
Galen, I have an update for you when the meeting goes on about our conversation last Friday or last Thursday.
Okay, like 7.
Yeah. Just want to keep you in the loop. I was going to send you an email today. So.
How's your trip?
Which trip?
Those are good, right?
Too busy. Yeah.
I've always been blocked by the phone. So this is probably. Just thought to bring some springtime into our late spring, our late, yes, our late spring, almost summer, dull windowless room. Yeah, Dave Bennett is not joining today, and Sarah Dentel will be joining online.
The Chelsea's been.
Yeah, she's usually back. Yeah,
But we.
I don't think we need a quorum today, but I think we should have enough anyways.
You're unmuted.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is a little after 9 o'clock. And I'm Carrie Fletcher. I'm the Chair of Housing Commission. And we are going to go ahead and start off with welcome and introductions. So I'm gonna start off today with Sarah. She
Okay.
can introduce herself.
Thank you. Good morning, Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development.
Gail is member at large, South County.
Chris Wilkes, member at large. As you know, North County rep.
Steve,
Oh, Dave Madison, Dave City Planner, member at large.
Parker Sammons, Tillamook County Housing Coordinator.
Michelle Ing, large employer representative.
and online I see some member prior.
Nan Dev. Oh, go ahead. Who's on? Go ahead.
Briar Smith, nonprofit representative.
Good morning, Briar. Nan,
Nan Devlin, Tillamook Coast Visitors Association.
and Megan.
Good morning, Megan Carpenter, City of Tillamook representative.
Good morning, and we do have some people in the audience today, so I'm gonna go ahead and have them introduce themselves and then we'll move online.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Corinne Karlovig, and I'm the new project manager for the Houselessness Action Network with CARE Inc.
Okay.
Rich Racky, figure idea, happy to be here.
All right, online, if there's some other people who'd like to introduce yourselves, I see a Bob Taylor.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, Bob Taylor, part-time resident, Tierra Del Mar.
Great, good morning. Doug,
Oop.
I'm Doug Sarcosta. I'm just an observer for today.
great, thank you. Let's see, Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself, Sarah?
Yes, sorry, struggling to unmute myself. I am Sarah Dental, and I am the representative of the real estate community.
Great.
And a member of the Housing Commission. There we go.
And I believe that's Tim Wood.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Hi, Tim Wood. I'm a project manager with FCS Group.
Todd Chase, also joining Tim here at FCS. Nice to see y'all.
Nice to see you. Well, perfect. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Mark for Mission Minute.
So this is a good opportunity for folks to shout out any interesting tidbits about housing that have happened in the last month or so, in Greater Tillamook.
Sure. We have had, last in May, before the planning commission, we had a presentation and a public hearing for the April subdivision, Misty Brook, and there were 45 people in attendance, which is about 2% of the city population, and about all of them were in opposition. Well, majority of them, very big majority of them were in opposition. They are going to have a continuation of the hearing on June 18th. Or at 5:30 at the planning commission. I would recommend any of you who would like to come to support the application, please show up. Because I know there's quite a bit of opposition, and so it'll always be good to see the other side.
Great. And is there going to be online that'll be available? There's been,
Yes.
what I've seen is possibly some misinformation on development standards for the division as far as like paving and sidewalks and so.
We'll have all the packet available.
Thank you.
Do you recommend that people join online, or would it be more effective to be in person in the room?
It would be more effective to be a person in the room.
Thank you.
It's always the best way to do it. But if you want to join online, we don't have any online Zoom per se, but it's called
18th where?
Huh?
18th where at?
It's Bay City Hall. Building with the mural, in Bay City,
5:30
5:30. Yep.
is when it starts.
Is when it starts.
And there's opportunity for public comment. They have not closed the
They
record.
haven't closed the hearing yet.
Okay.
They're in continuation because the applicant wanted to respond to the 15, 18, 45.
Okay.
Another.
The Third Street Brownfield project received $100,000 from DEQ for public infrastructure work. And so that will pay for the engineering on the public infrastructure that will be needed for that.
And the department also is slated to receive a $500,000 brownfield grant again from DEQ and EPA. So we will be looking at more sites.
Roll back, do it again.
And we have 2 housing sites in mind already. So Chris Keola will be reaching out to the PAC on that for more information.
I believe Chris will be here next month to talk about the raw properties. We'll be able to talk about that then.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The Manzanita City Council met last night, relevant to us and Manzanita Pines project. We've been supporting the RFP came in way too high, like 500,000 to $1 million too high. So for a huge retaining wall. So they rushed out a new RFP to get, I'm not going to divvy up the project into multiple parts so it can be afforded, but primarily the good news is they're going to push ahead and of course have the water out as a single project that will happen regardless. So the affordable housing apartments will have water so they can start building.
Parker, would you like to just mention that there was some pretty lengthy public comment that was received and date stamped yesterday that you will be sending forward to commission?
We did receive public comment regarding the Manzanita or the Spruce Point, I believe is the second name. Yeah. And regarding advocacy work around it. So I will be sending out an email with that and we will enter it into public comment at the next meeting.
Yeah.
It was date stamped last night, yesterday after business hours ended. So I wasn't really able to include it in the agenda or printouts or anything, but we will be sending it out and then putting it into the record next month.
Just want to make sure they get it timely if it was date stamped yesterday.
Yeah, totally.
Mhm.
But that was after business and just that didn't do much.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, well, there any members of the public that would like to make public comment this morning? Seeing no hands raised, we are going to move right into the housing needs assessment presentation conversation with Todd and Tim and Parker. Anyone?
Yeah, I will introduce them. Todd and Tim are from SCS. They are the consultants we hired to update our housing needs analysis. So they have worked off of our 2019 work. It was the same consultants, I believe, that did this. And they have taken the data, updated it, added some of the things that you guys requested, specifically breaking out North, Central, and Southern or South County. And there's some really interesting things in here, but I will leave it up to them to kind of speak for their work. So Tim and Todd, welcome. Thank you so much. And whenever you're ready, you can share your screen and we'll begin presenting. And then at the end, when we get to discussion, do stop sharing your screen so we can see your lovely faces.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time today to listen to us speak. I'm just going to pull this one up. Let me know if you can see that.
You can.
Looks like it. Okay, great. Again, just to introduce, my name is Tim Wood. I'm a project manager at FCS Group here. And yeah, Parker's correct. Got the opportunity to work on this project back in 2019. So pretty familiar with the issues that the county's facing and really excited to be able to update you on what we found in our efforts this time. So today we'll be going over the data updates. So basically the data that we gathered around housing issues in Tillamook County. We'll review some of the housing forecast scenarios that we've put together for you. We'll discuss how we've projected demand over the north, central, and south parts of the county. And then we'll talk about the next steps for this project. So some interesting data, and forgive me if you've got an older version of the PowerPoint that's been printed off that shows unincorporated county losing population, it's gaining population. So sorry about that. We got the wrong table in there. You can see here on my screen that county growth has been pretty steady, right around 0.5% annually. Gained 3,209 residents over the 2000 to 2023 timeline. And you can see within each of these different jurisdictions, some pretty interesting stories get told. So in particular, I'm drawn like a moth to the flame to this Bay City number, gathering 2.5% annually over a 23-year time frame. That's a lot of growth. So Bay City's been doing a lot of heavy lifting over there. Of course, the city of Tillamook doing a lot of the heavy lifting as well. Smaller, larger base there, so the annual growth rate's about 0.8%, but still adding quite a few people. And then as you might expect in the other communities in the county, the incorporated communities anyway, growth's pretty muted, mostly under 100, although Rockaway with 310 at 1% annual is pretty good. So, and of course, the unincorporated county gaining 1,162 people, pretty small growth rate there at 0.3%, but still something that we really have to keep track of because that's a lot of people. And I'm sure not surprising to this group, but still pretty interesting. We'll transition to what the population growth forecast. This is the population growth forecast that's provided by Portland State University. They're the kind of the authority statewide for population growth forecast. This is what most of your housing capacity analyses in different cities are going to be based on. So this is the latest growth forecast, and you can see pretty modest growth, county-wide growth, 0.3% annually. So it's a step back from the historic average over the last 23 years. And by the way, we're looking at 2025 to 2045 here. So basically the next 20 years, which is pretty standard for how these forecasts are calculated. So yeah, countywide growth, pretty muted, 2,000 people over the next 20 years. Something that sticks out like a sore thumb to me is this Bay City figure, basically flat over that 20-year time frame. Seems a bit unrealistic to me, but that's what the state's telling us. And then pretty muted elsewhere. Some growth in Nehalem and Rockaway and Tillamook. Again, another number that sticks out pretty heavily to me, 231 residents added over 20 years in Tillamook. I know there's some infrastructure issues there, but that seems awfully low to me. And then outside of urban growth boundary areas, so those unincorporated communities are taking on, over half of that growth according to the state. So, definitely an interesting look at it. But I think we'll probably use some other lenses and of course take your input to figure out how we want to calculate growth going forward.
And Tim, at the Bay City number real quick with the 7 people moving there, I'm guessing this is just because they're going off of historical data and aren't looking to the future, knowing that there's so many projects planned and the Bay City is continuing to grow.
Yes, that's right. They do typically use historical data. It's a mix of different factors that they use to calculate growth in different UGB areas. And of course, as you get to smaller and smaller geographies, these forecasts can be a little wonky. So that's why, through a process like this, it's important to gather local input from folks such as yourselves to make sure that we're right sizing that growth forecast for these communities. Because Parker, to your point, we certainly expect there to be more growth, probably tracking a little bit closer to historic averages rather than this projection.
Yeah.
I think these are figures for Bay City because these are in the 2023 was incorrect.
Okay. Well, then let's connect Tim and Dave to kind of see if we can't augment that data on the Bay City graph or chart.
Yeah, that sounds great. That would be really helpful. As you can see here, we've got population by age in your different incorporated areas. So the median age in Tillamook County, higher than the statewide average. Your central county communities, Bay City and Tillamook in particular, are relatively younger than your coastal communities such as Manzanita, Garibaldi, and Nehalem. And you can see that here with sort of the folks that are 45 and older being these, kind of purple to gold colors, and then your younger 0 to 19 and 20 to 44 taking up the kind of the cooler colors here. So again, you can kind of see the way that manifests. I mean, Tillamook, obviously much younger than the rest of the communities, same with Bay City. So pretty interesting. I don't know that it's very surprising, but definitely kind of confirms a lot of assumptions that I would have had coming in. And of course, important to note that average household size in the county, which is the number of people that are in dwelling units on average, has slipped from 2.41 in 2017 to 2.26 in 2023. So we're seeing, as time goes on, households getting slightly smaller, which is not specific to Tillamook County, by the way. We see that all over the state. So, but something that we, especially as we're projecting demand, and you'll see this later, this is a really important factor. So, something to keep an eye on there. This is a great graph that I think shows, not just how these different housing economies work, but I think speaks to some of the work you all have done. Insofar as we're seeing a lot of middle housing in the city of Tillamook, in Wheeler, and in Nehalem, in townhomes and plexes. So those are basically 1 to 4 units of attached dwelling units. And then within the multifamily category, you've got some pretty substantial share in Tillamook, about 20% of the housing stock in Tillamook, and close to 20% in Wheeler, which is pretty surprising. Mobile homes and other units, really, really dominant force in Rockaway and Bay City. So pretty interesting there, seeing some kind of alternative housing styles. And of course, the elephant in the room for all of these analyses is single family detached. So your standard, detached home. And you can see that's really, it's the majority in almost every community with the exception of Tillamook. And even there, it's the plurality of the housing units there. So, and again, pretty typical to see your larger cities, slightly less single family detached dependent, your smaller communities, more single family detached dependent. So interesting stuff to see there. Something that I think is really a point of emphasis across, coastal communities in particular, is looking at seasonal housing. So basically looking at housing that is either owned and occupied part-time by folks that own a second home on the coast, or your vacation rentals such as Airbnbs or Verbos. Your shares here aren't shocking to me, at least as I come in. You've got your much higher vacancy or seasonal housing rates in places like Manzanita and Rockaway, where they take up, the vast majority of the housing stock. In your more sort of central county communities, such as Tillamook and in Bay City, those are much more muted. So you're not seeing anywhere near as much of the vacancy. And of course, within these communities, such as Manzanita and Rockaway, you've got much less housing in particular, in general. So that 76 isn't a super high number of units. And in Tillamook, you've got a lot of housing, and it's not very vacant. Tillamook pretty much right on the nose with the statewide average there at 7% vacancy. So pretty good. And then I think the next slide is really encouraging, which is the share of seasonal housing over time in the county. So we go 2000, 2010, 2020, and 2023. And these darker bars, that shows your seasonal housing. So that's the number of seasonal housing units that are in the county. And you can see we've been seeing this this number of seasonal housing units increase, while the non-seasonal or just kind of the year-round housing units are pretty flat over that 2000 to 2020 timeframe. But what I'm really encouraged by is seeing this trend here as we go from 2020 to 2023, where you basically drop 800 units of seasonal housing and you add 800 units of year-round housing. So I don't know what's in the water right now over the last 3 years, but whatever it is, I think it's great news. Really helps to bring 800 units back online for folks that are working and living there year-round.
So Tim, this is Sarah. If I can I think what has helped contribute to that change is the work we did with the county's short-term rental program to limit licenses, limit ownership, remove transferability for new licenses. So I'm really encouraged by that, because that was one of our goals, was to find a way to create balance in our real estate market and needs. So I really appreciate this slide. I'm excited to share this with others.
And I would also say, I mean, I know the numbers of the SPRs when we talked about it, and this also shows that there was a voluntary, not like a permitting issue, not because there weren't enough. That's a huge drop compared to like what the wait list reflects right now.
Right, because with all of the wait lists, I mean, the program, since the pause and when we reopened the program in 2023, we've probably licensed an additional 100 units since 2023. But with the caps and the wait lists, which continue to grow in each of these communities, I think what this slide and this data shows is that those things are safeguarding our housing units to, again, not only create that balance, but the other goal of thoughtful growth, especially of our lodging, industry, which is a huge part of our economy.
Yeah, and should continue to be, but really encouraging to see your policy direction actually make this kind. I mean, I'll tell you, working across the state, doing these kinds of things, it's really rare to see it be this dramatic when you see a policy change occur. I mean, I didn't even know about that when I was collecting this data. And so I put this graph together thinking, wow, this is a really amazing, they'll be so excited to see this. And both of you have said, well, yeah, we kind of expected to see that. So really cool to see.
We hope to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's limited ownership. So we introduced a limitation. You cannot have ownership interest in more than one licensed property moving forward, because we have multiple areas across the county where corporations or people have bought multiple properties to use them solely as investment properties. So we stopped, nobody got their licenses yanked, but from July 2023 forward, you could not get any more if you already had one or five. And then with the transfer, there was also specific language about even if you wanted to transfer your licensed property into a corporation status or something like, so there was a one-time transfer granted to existing licenses moving forward, but any property we licensed after 2023 also has no transferability. So that golden ticket concept has been removed. And then the other thing that we added along with the caps was for multifamily dwellings, you could only license one of those dwellings in that structure. So that if someone, like all of the housing work we're doing with middle housing, someone wouldn't be able to license multiple units within that structure. At most, they would get one if now they also don't have ownership interest in any other licensed property in the county. And we check those things. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's great news. And here's more great news. You've seen income levels rise pretty significantly from the 2010 to 2023 timeframe. You can see here statewide that figure. This is median household income, so a pretty reliable measure of income. Statewide, that's gone up basically 30 grand. But you've seen that occur countywide, and in the city of Tillamook in particular. I mean, going from 27,000 to 57,000, that's a huge jump. So folks are making more money, which is going to make it easier for folks to afford housing. And I just think that that's really, really encouraging to see. And again, it sort of speaks to this nexus between housing and employment that you all have been focused on over the last 10 years or so. So really encouraging to see that. Median home prices, of course, have increased significantly over the last 10 years, with a pretty wide variance between your communities. Again, not shocking, but good to sort of see assumptions get validated there, where, in places like Garibaldi and Bay City and the city of Tillamook, it's pretty much in line with statewide standards, whereas in Manzanita in particular, you've got median home price of about $800,000. So less affordable there, and in Halem and those sorts of communities. But even in places like Rockaway, it's relatively affordable compared to the metro area for sure, and also in other sort of beach communities. So still tough though for your median household income to afford a home, as in order to afford paying 30% of your annual income on housing, you'd need about $106,000 to afford your median home in the county, which is about $500,000. So still work to do for sure. And for renters, that affordability problem is also still pretty acute. What we're showing here is cost burden and severe cost burden, and that's basically a measure of how many households are paying 30% or more of their income on housing. And then severe cost burden shows those paying 50% or more on their housing. So, over half of their income on rent here. And it's most acute, again, not surprisingly, in Manzanita, where 60% of your rental households are paying more than 50% of their income on housing. So really, really unaffordable there. And you've got similar levels of overall burden, but it's more muted in places like Rockaway and Tillamook, where folks are paying between 30 and 50% of their income. Not a great condition, but better than paying more than 50%. And then you've got places like Bay City and Halem, which have virtually no rent burden, which is pretty amazing. Countywide, you can see it's better than the statewide average, but probably by about 10% of folks. And you've got exactly the same number of cost burden. So the sort of less acute version, you've got much less in the way of severely rent burden. So again, more work to do on the rental side of things, but encouraging in some of the communities, in particular Bay City. To me, that's been the community that stood out in the data the most so far. Workforce housing needs. So, the original scope of this study was to look at workforce housing options back in 2019. So we took a look at some data around where commuters are coming from and how far they're traveling. So using some census data, we've determined that there's about 9,140 folks working in the county. And of that, 2,314 of those are commuting 50 miles each way or more. So really significant commutes. And this speaks to that need for continued emphasis on workforce housing, because I think under any circumstances, folks aren't really eager to drive 50 miles each way to work. So the solution there is to try and continue to build housing near your employment centers so that folks can live close to where they work and not have to travel so much. And Parker and I were kind of playing with this data yesterday, and we're asking the question, okay, well, where are these folks coming from? And as you might assume, predominantly it's from the east. So folks living in Washington County, Yamhill County, Multnomah County, Marion County, and then folks also coming in from the south, from Lincoln County, basically. We're also taking a look as we project demand at some different capture rate scenarios of saying, okay, let's say the county's goal is to capture between 15 and 25% of those folks traveling 50 miles or more each way to work. And these what if scenarios of, okay, how many dwelling units are we going to need to accommodate each of those? So it's between 150 and 250 units to accommodate more of those folks to kind of reduce that burden of travel. And that'll show up a little bit later on in our projection data. Another measurement of underproduction or pent-up demand, as you might call it, is the rental housing market gap. So what we do here is we take census data to say, here's the number of households that are renting at these different levels, or could rent at these different levels. So this is the number of households in each of these income brackets here. So you've got 830 households making 75,000 or more, 839 making between 50 and 74,999, et cetera. Then this column measures the number of units that are available at those price points. So basically asking the question, how many units are affordable to folks making these different income levels? And what we found, as we find in many communities, is that there's pent-up demand on the bottom end, which is not surprising, an underproduction of units affordable to those making less than 20,000. I mean, every community is going to have that. We estimate that's about 288 units of underproduction on the low end of the income spectrum. But the real surprise, as it is many places, is that there's an underproduction on the top end, suggesting that there's demand for high quality, more expensive rental units, right around 450 units in that category, where folks could afford more expensive rental units, but those don't exist. And so the result of that is that those folks rent down, or they rent in this category, those units that are affordable to folks making between $20,000 and $50,000 a year. So it creates this upward pressure on the cost of units in this category, because these folks are able to outbid the folks in that kind of middle income category. So again, for the purposes of the demand projection, we've asked, let's say we can aim to capture about 50% of the folks, or this pent-up demand on the top end, and 50% on the bottom end, totaling 371 units. But again, a lot of that's in the upper end. So we're just looking at market rate construction for that.
Kim, this is Sarah again. Can I make a clarification on that slide? Because I think this is a really important point. In the work that I'm doing with unincorporated communities for middle housing, one of the questions that routinely pops up in several of these communities is, Sarah, why are we doing work to put workforce housing in communities like ours? Because it's not workforce. Workforce can't afford to live here. And what I'm hearing you say on that slide is that there is a demand for higher end market rate housing, and that could ultimately relieve the pressure of the market on other types of housing stock. So doing that work in communities, regardless of whether or not the housing is quote unquote affordable for workforce housing, is still very relevant, because everyone needs housing regardless of your income. We need higher end housing or market rate housing too.
Yes, precisely. And this shows that.
Thank you.
Right here. Yeah.
Tim?
Say yes, because maybe 70% of our workforce that we hire, but income above and beyond workforce housing standards, but they still can't find housing. So that's a huge issue for the businesses in the county that need to hire professional positions and are struggling to fill them because of the lack of what I would call affordable market rate housing. Because they're not going to be able to get into the $800,000 and need a home and work as a nurse at the hospital. But they need to find that, modestly priced market rate house, especially because they might be a single person. So they've only got their single income. If they're moving here to work, they don't always bring family with them, or they don't always have two incomes right away. But the other thing I think, and I'm making an assumption, so correct me if I'm wrong, does this account for the people that are stacked up in homes? There are a lot of people, a lot of my children's peers are living at home with parents in their 20s, well into their 20s, and they would very much like to not be there. And they fit into that middle category where it says, oh, we really have any pent-up demand. I think we do.
Great.
to answer your question, this doesn't account for that. So that's another category of pent-up demand that's really difficult for us to quantify. But certainly another reality and another argument for continued construction and emphasis on, in particular rental housing, and that could be any category of housing, single family, detached, attached, and multifamily, at that upper end. It's tough because often these conversations sort of are framed around it's workforce housing or it's this luxury housing, and of course the truth is in the middle, right? We need all of it. So that's sort of here, right? We need subsidized housing in Tillamook County, no question, as every community does, but statewide, you've heard a lot of conversation around underproduction, and it's just true statewide. And that typically falls on this category of housing, that kind of upper end where there's demand for rental housing, for folks making, and this isn't really upper end, it's, a household making $50,000, which is right around the countywide average. So, we're looking just to house people who are making around the median county income. So, it's an all of the above thing, I think.
Hey, Tim, Megan online has a question.
Sure.
Hi, so this is one of the things that I brought up to Portland State University when they were here doing their initial numbers. And we have a lot of people living in vans. We have a lot of people living up in the hills. We have a lot of people that are living on the streets. And they didn't calculate those numbers in here. And that really skews what we're looking at as far as housing needed. And I wish that we could somehow nail down some accurate numbers for the houseless community and see where that fits into all of these calculations. I think it would give us a truer picture of what we actually need for our communities.
Yeah.
We do some of that, probably bedded in the group quarters forecast too.
We do. But it is really difficult to get at that number, of course, because most counties only have the point in time count, and that's, sort of dubious, I think, at times. It's the best data that we have, but it often undercounts, I think, the reality of the houselessness situation in any jurisdiction. So we try our best to get at that in this analysis, and you'll see we're trying to sort of take the Portland State forecast and augment it based on some of these different metrics that we're looking at that we can pretty credibly quantify. But your input today, of course, is going to help us, make that forecast really trued up. So really appreciate that comment.
Correct. That's something that we can write on to try and sort of in a different way. But make an estimate.
Yeah.
I'll take it from Tim. So the state legislature passed a housing requirement last session that gets to the need to forecast kind of the underproduction of housing in communities. And it requires the metro region, at least here in Portland, to quantify that. And they have, and I think they said, I think the number is like 15,000 units have been, not produced to meet the current demand in the last few years. And we applied that similar methodology to Tillamook County to look at just the permanent housing inventory and the permanent population or households in this slide. And we applied the ratio that's a national factor of basically 1.085 dwellings per permanent household to ensure kind of a healthy housing inventory in the local communities. And we, reduced the current permanent housing stock from the permanent or from that needed inventory to come up with an undercount of about 1,004 units of underproduced housing that could be absorbed in real short order in Tillamook County if they were delivered in the next few years. We could further break this down by income level, and we probably would show you that about half of that would be for households earning 80% or less of the of the median income level in the county and half above the 80% level. It includes or could reflect some of the which would be the demand from workforce, long-term, long-range commuters, as well as the rent supply gap that Tim showed in the previous slide. So they're all kind of pointing towards about 1,000 units of underproduction that could be absorbed in the immediate short term.
So we'll now walk you through our calculation of how we're getting to the next 20 years of demand for the county. So this is projection scenario A, which just is as standard as it gets. It's the Portland State University population growth forecast. And we filter it through how you would typically project housing need demand in a housing capacity analysis. So we take that 2043 projected addition of population. We take out some of the group quarters population, which is folks living in congregate care facilities, homeless shelters, jails, that kind of thing, sort of the group home model. Right now, the county average on that is about 3%. So we take 3% of that out. That's 61 residents. That leaves us with 1,982 residents that live in households. We divide that by that 2.21 average household size to get to an 897 dwelling unit demand forecast over the next 20 years for year-round demand. We then take an additional 39% for that countywide seasonal and vacant rate, adding another 575 units for a total of 1,471. So that's your baseline forecast as we would typically project that using the methods used in housing capacity analysis. We augmented that based on a lot of that analysis that we already showed you. So that 1471, same number that we use to kind of get to that projection. Then we add pent-up demand for market apartments, that kind of the upper end underproduction of rental units. Pent up for the lower end of those rental units, the subsidized ones. The capture rate of the 100 plus mile commuters, and then add back in that group quarters population. So kind of getting at that demand for more, kind of housing aimed for the houseless. And then we get a new demand number of about 2,057 dwelling units over the next 20 years. So that kind of addresses projected population increase and also starts to get at that underproduction, pent-up demand factor. So those two population projections are the ones that we use to project the demand by north, south, and central. Just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page, I put together this section map that shows where we're estimating the north, the south, and the central delineations. So as you might expect, north end goes from the county border pretty much all the way down to the north end of the bay. Central collects all the space from the north end of the bay down to the spit, and then further down from there all the way down to the county line on the south end. So a handful of assumptions are used as we project these demand figures because we're trying to factor in sort of local conditions in each of these different three sectors of the county. So part of that is understanding the existing housing inventory by region. So using that delineation that we just talked about, we show demand for the north, existing housing inventory for the north, the central, and the south, basically by housing type. So as you might expect, the north and the south, more single family detached, central less so. In the central, you've got much more single family attached, much more in the way of plex units, and much more in the way of multifamily 5+ units. Significant concentration of mobile homes and other in the north end, which is pretty interesting to see. So this is sort of the existing market conditions that will help us project out demand. The other thing we wanted to make sure that we get an understanding of is within each of those 3 areas, what is the current distribution of housing inventory and population? So housing inventory, pretty well split between north and central, and then not a whole lot in the way of housing inventory in the south, basically 40-40-20. Population, again, not surprising, but nice to have my assumptions validated. You've got, much more population in the central, especially relative to the number of housing units. And that's a factor, of course, of the vacancy in each of these different areas. You've got much more housing in the north than you do population in terms of the share. But again, because of vacancy. So, and same in the south, more housing than you have population. Moving that forward, we've made some adjustments to projected housing inventory to recognize the fact that, especially with state laws changing, and I think with the county's emphasis on, sort of an all of the above housing strategy, we wanted to sort of reduce the number of single family detached, or the share of single family detached that we see going forward. It's modest, this adjustment, but we wanted to make it so that we see a bit more, especially single family attached and 5+ units in the central, and across the board, really, we're seeing a little bit more in those middle housing categories than we would typically. And then to weight the distribution of that population growth or the housing demand, because as we just saw, there's a difference between existing housing and existing population in those 3 places. So we're weighting housing as 25% and population as 75%, just to recognize that we're wanting to hit the demand where it is for folks that are year-round residents and workforce. So using those factors, we've projected.
Sorry. Kim, Michelle Yank again. On going back to that previous slide, I'm just curious because we know our demographic is skewed older. And I believe the state data, I can't remember exactly. I just heard it in a meeting the other day. It's either, I want to say 50 to 75% of single family dwellings are inhabited by a single older adult. It's like staggering. Mm-hmm. So with that trend likely to continue where, people retire here and there might be 2 people in a single family home for a while, but so not long before there's a single individual in that 3-bedroom house that was their vacation home, but now there's no assisted living for them in Tillamook County. So if they want to stay here where their network of support is, they need to be in a smaller unit like a duplex or something, or maybe cottage. Yeah, a cottage cluster scenario. So I'm curious if that would change these projections at all, that what I consider to be reality.
Yeah, so we try to keep the amount of single family detached pretty high, but we are trying to bump those up. And this table here is one of the big parts that, basically these 2, because these drive the way the projection looks. This is where we're going to want your input. So that's really good input, and I'd be happy to kind of make those adjustments based on that input, because that's a reality that I don't think I had front of mind, but it's something that I think we should be addressing and be pretty explicit about.
Well, this does show quite a bit more middle housing than you currently have on the ground in terms of the mix going forward. So we try to recognize that, that demand is going to be generated by both seniors that might want to move into kind of a congregate care situation in 5+ units, or ADUs, and then younger families who can't really afford a detached home yet. We're only going out 20 years, so it's not 100 years in the future, but yeah.
Over the next 20 years, we're going to see the baby boomers continue to age. And we are not replacing them with the under 18 is declining. So I think for the next 20 years, but what I don't want us to do is overbuild for the next 20 years and then be lopsided 20 years after that when everything readjusts after this baby boomer generation. So I think we need to be mindful of that.
Well, I think one thing that you can't calculate into this is you talk to most businesses in Tillamook County. They calculate their ability for growth because of the housing. We don't have housing, so companies aren't growing to the size that they would love to be at. I would love to hire 20 more people, but you can't bring them into this county because there's no housing. The mill would love to increase production, creamery. I mean, businesses have gotten to the point where they say, yeah, we'd love to get to this growth, but we can't. And it's not obtainable because there's not enough housing in the county to support that kind of growth. So we're handcuffing the businesses too.
Well, and there's the catch-22 of our situation. If we live somewhere beautiful where people want to live and work, and if we get housing, the more affordable we get the housing, the more people want to come and live and work here. And we have to balance it. We have to make sure it's the right type of housing to bring in the right people to work the jobs that are available. If all we do is expand our single family housing stock, we could do that forever and ever and ever, and just get more and more second fund vacation homes. That don't come with workers that.
Well, but Amazon's moving in, and I know 3 of their workers are already on a list in a trailer park. Have a spot to put a trailer when it's ready because there is no housing for them. Yeah, like I said, you can't. Projections say we need 1,000 houses. That's if you're taking into consideration that we're not going to have any industry growth in Tillamook County.
Right.
Well,
That's just to maintain where we're at.
where we're gonna see it the most over the next 20 years is in tourism, and those are not high income earning roles. I think that we would probably benefit from shifting these numbers a little bit more toward those multifamily, middle housing units because of some of those factors.
I also think that just this conversation is kind of exposes what I have long seen as a gap because of the connection between economic development here and housing. If you want to develop your tourist industry and expand that industry, you have to have housing for people to work there. But if you do that too well, then you end up with people moving here for second homes and vacation homes. So there is this balance of growth that needs to be achieved. That's really hard to project demand because they're so interrelated. And if we're really, really good at our job and we bring in a lot of affordable housing, we will see more people moving here and that demand will increase. It's self-fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And just to,
yes.
And just to kind of go back. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Parker.
No, go ahead, Tim.
Just want to show, so this is our existing mix, right? So you've got, I mean, a pretty high number of that single family detached. And again, kind of going back over here, you see that mix decreasing, I think at pace with what the market wants. But if the committee thinks, hey, let's bump up that, 5+ unit share in north and south, or, plexes, maybe more in central, whatever input, we're happy to make those adjustments because we want to make sure that it's the right projection.
Yeah, we're trying to get at what do you think you really need to accommodate and plan for immediately with respect to infrastructure, water, sewer, vacant land, buildable land, by location, north, central, south, and just step back and take a look at it and see what it's telling us.
So
I do want to interject real quick and just say, this is kind of the last opportunity for these guys to get some feedback before this report gets published and finalized. Mm-hmm. And so as you guys have questions and through our discussion, as we wrap in a moment, we'll get into, just keep careful notes. I'll be reaching out and asking for anything and then kind of preparing some feedback for the consultants here to take into account as they prepare their final version. So if you guys do have anything that you feel strongly about, we'll discuss it and we'll kind of get it off to them.
Okay, so based on those factors that we just shared, this is what the projection looks like north, south, and central. So because we emphasize population so much, central gets the bulk of the projection, the projected growth, about half, which reflects not just kind of existing conditions, but also the trends that we're seeing in Tillamook and Bay City in particular. But still pretty substantial growth there in the north and the south, a little more muted, but that's kind of the way that it is in the existing conditions. So not shocking there. And as you can see, we still got really healthy growth projected for single family detached, which I think will still remain, at least the majority of what we're seeing in the county over the next 20 years, but pretty healthy growth in single family attached, which is a great sort of starter home opportunity and a great rental opportunity for folks that are living in the central county. And then again, significant growth in that kind of the apartment category, about 200 more units there, which I think will go a long way to addressing the rental shortage. But of course, speaking to that high end demand on the rental category, here you've got close to 50 units on the north end, which I think is certainly worth approaching, and more modest growth there in the south. So that's where our projections landed. And as Parker said, any input that we want to discuss, talk about right now, these are the two tables that are pretty much the most relevant that really drive the forecast. Of course, that and our forecast number at the beginning. But any thoughts, any input? Should we be changing any of these numbers to make sure that this reflects reality, or kind of what we want to see in the future?
Tim, I have a question. This is Sarah again. In the projected number of units for South County, just anecdotally thinking about all of the building permits that the department's issued for dwelling units, Pacific City, Nescoin, there's a lot of places in South County that have grown exponentially, albeit it may be more second homes than anything else, but there's a lot of people interested in that area because of job opportunities in Lincoln City, right? So those communities are within a very short commuting distance to a lot of employers, both to the north and the south. So I would say I'm just really surprised at the low number for South County when North County has a very similar situation, more incorporated cities, but actually the communities in South County arguably are the same size or larger than the cities in North County. So I'm just curious why there's such a difference between those two.
Yeah, I think it's mostly just kind of it's mostly the population, I think, because population is the bulk of the concentration of existing population. And I totally hear that Pacific City and Nescoin are on the bigger side. But on the north end, there is a lot of that kind of existing population. So that's driving it. But to your point, there's probably some market realities that aren't reflected in the existing data that we might want to factor in here to bump that south portion up. Now, I want to make sure that mix looks right too, because it sounds like we're probably looking at a little more workforce housing in the south than we might expect based on the data that we have. So is that something that maybe we want to see, these kind of the middle housing categories increase in the south, as well as the overall projection there?
Yeah, I think so. And I think because we're just getting ready to take all the middle housing codes to hearing, and some of the greatest flexibility for middle housing is in those South County communities.
Yeah.
Tim and Todd, another thing that drives demand when we get close to our county lines, and this is just a bit of a quirk of how we decide what income limits are, but when we work in middle housing, specifically for workforce level housing, those are rent controlled, not income verified properties. And because of that, when we get close to Clatsop County, where their AMI is about $20,000 greater than ours, or to Lincoln, where they're just slightly above ours, it does mean that our rents, when we are doing that 80 to 120% housing, will be lower than if they were built just across the county line, where they would then be reflective of a higher AMI dictating their rents. And I know that this is a really hard demand element to quantify here, but it does mean that if you are in that 80 to 120% range and you are looking for housing that you can afford that is rent controlled, you will have better luck crossing state lines into South Tillamook if you live in Lincoln, or into North County if you live and work in Cannon Beach or Seaside.
Yeah.
because of the big disparity in the AMI between our counties. I don't know, that does not have the same effect going east and west, just I think because there's too much distance. But if we compare that to where people are coming from, and maybe this is an analysis we want to do, but Tim, just thinking back to us looking at that direction map of where people are driving to and from for work, we could probably find out if our lower AMI is actually driving any of that.
Well, I'm sure that it is.
Yeah.
It seems pretty clear that that's a, there's some market signals that are there. So sounds like maybe we want to bump up your multifamily share in north and south just to reflect that what we expect to see in terms of subsidized rental development on both of those sides. And hey, great that it's, people are being able to take advantage of that. That kind of the difference between the counties. So yeah, that's actionable.
It would also be really great to benchmark it this time so that in 4 or 5 years, when this analysis is done again, we will be able to go back and compare and find out how many people are working up in Seaside at the hospital, but living in the workforce housing in Manzanita or whatever it might be. It'll be interesting to see if it is are we building it and people are coming, or are we building it and people are like upgrading out of their poor housing situation into a better one within the county? And it also means that these people, there'll be more competition for this housing for people outside the county that we might not be considering.
Right.
Well, your ability for growth, we have to keep looking at south and north because central has too many roadblocks with infrastructure. I mean, developers aren't looking here because they can't look here.
Well, in South County, I feel like because it is an unincorporated part of the county itself, there should be, because of the work we're doing, fewer roadblocks to development down there. And quite frankly, it needs it. There's a lot of blight in South County, and it's not a very livable community for people. And we want people to live in places in our county where they can take a sense of pride and ownership. And that's lacking in certain pockets of the South County area that's highly buildable.
Yeah.
I just feel like part of these numbers reflect the fact that it's more desirable to live in North County than it is in South County for reasons of.
You don't have amenities.
Yeah, exactly.
Amenities drop the second you go to Cloverdale. I mean,
yeah, and I think a lot of the people that live in the Cloverdale, Beaver area are working in tourism and agriculture, and those are not any of the marine areas. Have to have housing for those populations. That's not likely to change because of where they are geographically located.
Is there anywhere down in the Hebo Beaver area that has both sewer and water where a large footprint multifamily could be built?
Yeah, that's why we're doing the work in Hebo and Cloverdale, along with Pacific City and Niskowin.
So we do have opportunities now.
Yeah.
Well, it just shows why 406 is such a boon for us, because there's nowhere else in the state that would be able to take a community like Hebo and Beaver, and just because there's infrastructure to be able to build what we need.
Right. And they're trying. I mean, I think that's the other message. They're really trying. I think Kingfisher is a great example, and we learned a lot of lessons from that project that we were trying to make sure those barriers don't pop up again. But there's a strong desire for community livability and quality housing in those communities.
For the state's part, they are making a big push to make sure there are rural set-asides for communities like that to be able to get the both infrastructure and public housing dollar support to make it happen. So,
and those are the two critically needed next steps. Yes. It'll tell you infrastructure's come up in every conversation.
Infrastructure will be the focus of a lot of our work for next year, I think.
Comparison between this and the previous one. Is there any success stories as far as like the current demand? Even we're looking at 2057 here. Projection was there a change in the needle from the prior study on the number of units needed?
Great question.
Don't have that off the top of my head, but I can certainly get back to you on that.
That'd be great. And then on the manufactured homes or mobile homes, is that strictly, are those the same ones in the park? Or are we talking about I'm assuming that single family, you're not considering single family, ones that are on permanent foundations on single family lots.
Yeah,
I-
that's some nuance. I do believe that that's within parks. But again,
Can include ADUs.
it sometimes includes ADUs, but that's not really a big factor in the county, right? But I believe that single family detached includes mobile homes that are parked on single family lots, but I'll look into that for you. Those are good questions.
Todd, I'd like to just jump back into Carrie's initial question. So really, I mean, the critical need of this work has two punchlines. One, what is our greatest housing need? And two, have we moved the needle since 2019? So I know the Board of Commissioners is going to be expecting to see those summaries in this report.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can easily make the argument for the latter question that progress has been made. I mean, looking at seasonal and vacant, and I think also looking at the change in terms of housing by type over the last 5 years, we have seen an uptick relative to prior of that middle housing, workforce housing. So I think that's really important, but I'll bring some affordability metrics too for that, because I think that would be really helpful.
That'd be great.
I do want to say I'm noticing that Bob has his hand up, has been very patient.
Yeah, my question was similar to somebody just mentioned ADUs. I didn't see reference to ADUs, so that was part of my question. And connected to that was, is there any consideration for expanding, say, ADU opportunities to areas that are currently not allowed to have ADUs? For example, the area where I have a part-time residence in Tierra del Mar, I think rural areas, if I'm not mistaken, is there any consideration for expanding ADU zoning in the future?
So Bob, this is Sarah. That's really a land use question, right? So as you know, we've done the ADU option in rural residential zones, which is what Tierra Del Mar is. But there is by the legislature a requirement for a 2-acre minimum to even qualify, which I personally feel is a barrier. Especially when you look at our lot patterns and average size of these rural residential zone lots. My hope is that this is something that the legislature will revisit. That might be something for the Housing Commission to work with Senator Weber, Representative Javity, and others moving forward. We tried several years ago to get a ADU bill passed through the legislature for rural residential zone properties at a much smaller size. Because most of these properties are also served by sewer. So you have some size limitations there anyway. And we were unsuccessful. So just even it now, like ADUs being on the books for rural residential zoned areas was a huge victory. But we know it's not enough based on that barrier to size.
And we've done a lot of work on allowing ADUs pretty much as much as they will let us.
We have exercised every option and opportunity to do that, and they're all adopted in our codes. But the size for the rural residential zone is a barrier.
Yeah, I know that very well from talking to my mother in the past. So thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for joining us today, Bob. It's good to hear from you.
Thank you.
Any other input for us before we go back to the drawing board with this?
I'll
And of
get those
course-
corrections into you. Oh, sorry, with Dave from Bay City, I'll get those corrections into you. I don't know, through Parker or?
Yeah, everybody send any corrections or input questions, anything you want to see to me, and I will prepare a report for them. I'll send that to you guys as it comes in, and then when I feel like I have everything, I'll put it all together into one place. So let's say by Wednesday of next week, have any questions or considerations you'd like me to share with the consultants in. And then for my part, I will try to provide some sort of, I'll work with Sarah to provide some sort of analysis of what maybe could be in South County that we are not considering in this report.
Yeah.
And what sort of, I'll try and find some way to demonstrate some sort of demand of cross-county traffic using those awesome tools you showed me, Tim. So I think we can, that's what I've got so far.
Thought was, is there gonna be, I know in the last HNA, you guys provided a forecast by income level. Beside countywide by income level, is that something that you can read?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll bring that to the table too. We'll show it in a bunch of different ways, the demand. Because that is, you're right, it's increasingly the way that this demand is shown in housing capacity analyses. So yeah, I mean, certainly we'll take a look at it that way too.
Great, thank you.
So really quickly to just cover next, oh, sorry.
I was just thanking you, and this is super helpful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's really happy to be able to do it. And, you know, had the privilege to work all over the Northwest. This is a very unique body and very cool to see a community take this problem head on and having been doing it for as long as you have, kudos. And it's really paying off, I think. Quick next steps, we will take your input, both what you've given us today and what Parker shares with us next week. Use that to revise and complete a draft HNA report. And then we'll look to have the final report completed by July. So yeah, looking forward to being able to continue to provide good input for you and looking forward to sharing our results. So that's it for us. Yeah, happy to, you know, be able to just chat with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. You guys have been so great to work with, and we look forward to seeing the final report.
Great. Well, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your meeting. Take care, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right, Parker, it looks like you're still on the agenda.
I've also built in some time here for us to have a conversation about this. If there's any other questions or if anybody wants to have any feedback that you're thinking of or anything you just want to call out as interesting, a success, or something we want to pay attention to in this report so far.
I have a question. I don't know if this is helpful or not, but Sarah, could you reflect a little on the projected needs for the various communities and the conversations that you've had with the various communities regarding what they think they need and what they want?
Yeah. Yeah, you can do that. So in terms of the projected needs, the critical piece is using this HNA as part of that. Because we don't have, I mean, we can talk anecdotally, but data-driven information, really, I'm relying on this report as well. In terms of what they want and what they need, it varies by community. I would say so I'm working with 10 unincorporated communities total. So Barview, Twin Rocks, Watsego is one community, but it's technically 3 different areas. So 10 communities altogether. There are some, like I mentioned earlier, who feel that this is just pointless because their properties in their communities are not affordable. So there's a big struggle with that of why us, why are we a part of this? Expanding thought to more than just a single family dwelling on a piece of property has been a monumental cultural shift. In those communities, and I would say other communities that are definitely more open and supportive of this work, I've done a lot of GIS work to talk about where are the vacant properties, how many are there, what are their sizes, because these codes and where different types of housing, when you get into triplexes, fourplexes, and cottage clusters, is predicated on size. There's a minimum size requirement. So then pulling that into the equation, I've done an exercise with most of our communities. I call it the 3 Fs. And it's fear, fact, and feasibility. And so I've had community meetings where I put up the GIS map, I talk about the data in more of an interactive way, and a bit candidly, honestly, to help kind of relieve that tension and that fear. But we list out all of the fears first. So whatever anybody wants to say, what is your fear? My community is going to change. I don't want a big, massive block structure next to me. Where are they going to park? We don't want our water and sewer bills to go up because the district is going to have to expand to meet infrastructure needs. They're going to all be turned into short-term rentals. Just, I mean, whatever it is, it's a safe space for them to just dump whatever they need to say that fear is. So then we talk about the facts. So that's when I pull in the short-term rental stuff. That's when we talk about, well, there's still setbacks. There's still lot coverage in some areas. There's still building heights. There's all these things that come in. So we talk about that. And then we go back to the map talking about topography, because you might see a big piece of property, but it's not flat and perfect, right? So by the time we get through that exercise, most communities have been able to take a breath and walk away feeling like, okay, we know we need housing. I can live with this. And I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and the quadplex ferry will have ruined my neighborhood, right? So that's always the goal. And it's been a very good conversation. I'm doing it. I have one last time I am doing it. And it'll be July 15th with the community of Neoconi. And I think that is probably going to be the one that needs the most time and attention to really help talk through these fears and concerns. There are several communities that have said, I didn't know we had such a low lot coverage maximum. Can we change that? And I'm like, of course. So there's been that part of the education. And then a lot of conversations in communities related to aging in place. People do not want to leave their communities. Your points are spot on. And I see that because when I hold most of these communities, I have meetings with every 2 weeks. And I have for several months. And then a lot of general community meetings through the CACs on Saturdays and on evenings. I see them all show up individually. It's a real thing. So we talk about wanting to stay in the community and what does that look like and how can we make that happen? And that's the cottage cluster and the ADU piece, I think definitely. There I have 2 communities. I will say one being Pacific City. And if you go back to the record in history, I don't think volatile is an overstated word for what Gail and I have witnessed in public hearings and community meetings when it comes to housing. And this has been the most peaceful process. Like they're good. They're like, yeah, our community is open to housing opportunities. And we all survived Kingfisher, right? So I think that it's been a very interesting experience over the last year, specifically I would say the last 6 to 8 months to see how that's all unfolded. But it has been an easier conversation in some communities than others. Because I've done so much community work, I don't know what we're going to see at hearings. I think there's a couple of communities that will come out pretty strong to voice their concerns. Most of them are going to be over infrastructure and parking. And then I think it's going to be pretty quiet because they're okay, which I think is a success. They're not going to feel the need to come.
Maybe you can do your 3X at Bay City.
What I can't, it's funny when I start out with, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's dreamed up that concept and that technique. But when I start a meeting with, we're going to talk about the 3 Fs today, Everybody's like. So it's pretty good. You know what they're thinking, and I'm like, those aren't the F's we're gonna talk about. Yeah.
I think that you guys just chew on about this report is how do we get the most mileage out of this?
Yeah.
And so for Heidi and Chris, like how do we get this information into the hands of builders deciding where they want to look for property and projects? And just to show them that the demand is there. How can we leverage this into banks giving better rates because they're more comfortable loaning on projects where there is this high demonstrated demand? How can we get this into the hands of communities and cities and anybody who can help this? And what is the best way to package it? And I would also like to remind everybody that we are not the only ones doing a housing needs analysis on Tillamook right now, because DLCD is doing theirs. And I was not here during the previous needs analysis that they put out, but it was not one that was in very close concert with the last one we did. And they did not do similar calculations for STRs and second homes and things like that.
It wasn't part of the work.
It wasn't part of the work. And so I have watched them really approach this new housing needs analysis. They've reached out to me and other housing professionals trying to get great feedback and data so that they don't miss anything this time. But it will be very interesting to see what our work looks like versus theirs. And all of that is to say is, I don't want this information to just go sit in a desk drawer somewhere. So how over the next month, think about where we can bring this, where we can take this. Is it elected officials? Is it, getting someone at the state? Is it whatever it is? Let's just try and use this to the best of our ability and really try and leverage it. So that's just kind of the consideration I would ask you guys to make.
Well, and I know we have our state of the city every year,
Right.
and I think just presenting this to the public is
that's a
the
great
best thing
idea.
to do.
Yeah.
Keeping them up,
That's a great
keeping them
idea.
aware of what's going on, keeping them aware of growth and demand, things like that.
Yeah, I would like to generate a press release
Yeah.
based on this once it's finalized.
Yeah.
And then I think, pull TESOL, adapt for some social media sharing through health promotions. But I would also like to see us develop strategic initiatives that we, whether they're formalized as objectives and key results or OKRs or something else, I'd like to see us have now that we have some projected aims to break those down into goals for our work and benchmark our progress toward those goals so that we can be reporting out, but also so we can stay focused. It's really easy to get pulled in every direction. Oh, we got this project that came out of the blue. Well, that's great. Is it aligned with where we said we're going to really focus our energies? We can still invite them to apply for housing production solutions funds or whatever. Where are we going to focus our energies so that we can get that X development in the right location in the county to meet the exact need that we identified as a high priority?
Well, and then we have to think of Senate Bill 406
Right.
and the HPS and those housing production.
And the HCA and
And
right.
so we have to then introduce that to the communities about how are you going to meet this need?
Right. And I think this HNA is the great starting point because this is the platform for that work we're going to do next. Because the other part of Senate Bill 406 is the housing production strategies, the housing capacity analysis. So getting ready to apply for a grant, Parker and I were on the DLCD work session meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we couldn't see who was on there. But that's step 2, and that will weave nicely into this work. But I think this is the introduction. This is the introduction to get us there to help communities understand what those next steps are going to look like.
Now, I have a question for you after. the
Sure.
meeting about that.
Sure.
And I was, I know going back to the original HNA, we always wanted some sort of progress bar from the Universal Development Round.
Yeah.
And I know that Senate Bill 406 is going to force us to
There's a lot of reporting.
report that and report that out, but I think it should be a great kind of starting point to make sure that we keep track of our successes and not lose focus.
Well, I would encourage the commission, not just that falling on Parker's shoulders or my shoulders. They get tired of hearing me and talking, I mean, I'm there all the time. I'm like the old Matt in front of the door. The energy and the newness of this coming from commission members that are willing to attend these meetings and the state of, the city or coming to CAC meetings to talk about these things is really important because it can't just always be us. They've got to hear it from non-government officials that are paid to do this work and hear it from a commission that is a credible body that's really passionate about this work.
Dan, Dan, are you ready?
Hi. Oh, let me go. Can you hear me okay now? Okay, thanks. And I love this presentation. I thought it had a lot of great information. I was taking screenshots from each slide so I could share with my board. But I want to make just like an overall statement and what I've been hearing. I work with a lot of people throughout the whole county that are younger. They would like to continue to stay here, live here. They want to, and 4 of my board members are between like 38 and 40 years old, and they want to live here, raise their families here. Key to doing that is growth, and that means growth in business. It means growth in housing availability. It means growth, and I know that a lot of people, because I hear that too, we don't want any changes. We've got what we've got and we don't want any changes. And I understand that completely. But in order for this county to thrive, it has to develop in ways that will keep young people here. And I hear this stuff all the time. And, so anyway, just some thoughts. Thank you.
Dan.
I think what I'm hearing, especially, talking about like, taking the show on the road and going out and doing some outreach to the communities. I'm just going to talk, like, kind of make this a little more practical and actionable here, thinking through what our next meetings are and what our current timelines are. So next month at the July meeting, we will be finalizing opening up the housing fund in August, going over the changes we're making, and I will be coming with a revised guidebook. I forgot what we call it, but for our housing fund. And then we'll be opening in August, and then August and September application period will be over, and that will be a fantastic window for us to really dive into this work. And so I think a good goal here would be by the time the housing fund wraps up, I should be ready to have a presentation with both this data and any data that comes from DLCD or the state. And I'll have a presentation ready to go so that by September, October, November, I will be able to go to any city council meeting or planning commission meeting or anywhere that you all feel needs this presentation. Rotary.
Exactly.
I'm happy to go to all of that, but how I would like to do it is to be invited by you. And so if you have a place where you want this to go, I would like you to reach out to the city council and say, well, I would like to bring Parker Salmon's housing coordinator to give you this presentation on needs analysis so you can understand what we're looking at. I do not want to be the one forcing my way into these meetings. So please, you will have to help book me. You can be my agents and then be there at the meeting with me. As I think the thing, I don't think it's a good idea for me to go and give these presentations without one of you here.
Yeah.
So any meeting that you're willing to attend, that you want me there, starting in September, you can count on me having a presentation ready to go, and I will show up and be super charming. So that is, does that sound about right for everybody? September, we can start taking this information and really pushing it out there for these meetings.
What I would love is if you have an idea of what you would want to facilitate, could you email it to me? And then I'll work with the housing, the outreach committee to create like a grid and map out all the things, fill in the blanks of anything that wasn't already suggested and identify who's gonna be the connector and co-presenter so we could get organized and, because we want this to happen.
Exactly. And I'm much better giving the same presentation over a month than over 5. So, let's do that. And please be thinking about your communities. And specifically, like, Chris and Heidi, if you have a place where I can come and deliver this information to builders, again, trying to get that information to where people can make actionable decisions and target places that are in high need, for building.
We could host the meeting right here and do a invite all the contractors that are in our database.
Have an industry presentation night meeting or of some type. I definitely do that in the evening because I know those people work. So it's probably gonna have to be the evening on that one. So get creative. Think about where I can go and share this information that might be very helpful. And I'm going to use that to move us into our next agenda item, if that's okay, because we do have 2 housing summits coming up. And the first will be the North Coast Regional Solutions is meeting here at the Port of Tillamook on the 16th, Monday the 16th at 1 p.m. That is Regional Solutions, and that's going to be a housing conversation with me and Alyssa Gertler and Susie Dahl will be here. And it's more of a conversation, less of an action meeting or anything. That's very much you're welcome to attend, but do not feel obligated. If you would like to come and see how Regional Solutions works, that's great. I don't want to overwhelm them because it is a smaller meeting with like the entire Housing Commission showing up. But just so please email me if you're interested in attending that. And then in September 16th, will be a larger housing summit. This will be in Astoria, and Colpack is putting this on. And again, me, Susie, and Alyssa, and that's CLASIP and Columbia County housing professionals. Well, Susie does it all. But there we will be having a much more kind of solutions focused conversation. And I would love for any or all of you to attend that one because that's Colpack. It's going to be in a big room in a big space.
No, it's Colpack tomorrow.
That's not our summit tomorrow. Isn't tomorrow?
Are they just having their regular meeting?
Well, I got an email yesterday saying there's
Oh,
Northwest Oregon Housing Summit.
that is the planning meeting. That is the steering committee for the September meeting. So that's where they will be doing some planning. So if you would like to attend that, I will also invite you to that if anybody hasn't. But that is more of a steering committee on what the September meeting will look like.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, thank you. I forgot how many people are connected to that as well. Then, yeah.
Open commission seat.
Open commission seats. I think it is time, if we would like to have new members being sat in time to take part in the Housing Production Solutions Fund process, we need to begin to open our seats now. It does require a little bit of interview work and it does put a lot of work on Terry and Mark. But we do kind of ask that one person who is not Terry, Mark, or myself be there for interviews. So as we start scheduling interviews, I will invite and ask someone to come and join us and help do the interview process. Especially helpful if Commissioner Scar is unavailable, and I know she's very busy. So we do try to have at least, I think, wasn't that right, Carrie?
I think we had 3 regularly.
Yeah, that's right.
Last time, but yeah, it was the 3 of us and occasionally we did have a 4th join in, but it is very nice to have 4 present just to have
A little mix up.
mix it up a little bit.
Yeah.
What are the open seats?
The open seats, I believe, are nonprofit. After Marley's departure, and I'm going to check right now. I believe the rest of them are at large, though.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I believe that is all I need is y'all nod to begin the process to do that. So I will check in with the commissioner's office and the county commissioner's office, and Isabel usually gets us right away.
Yeah.
If you have people that you would like to apply for the housing commission, do start telling them that that is going to be coming out.
And
I think it's
Yeah, Nan is, your employer.
So how many vacancies are there? Because I know the board order says up to.
Up to 15 seats, I believe, is what the board order says. And currently, that means we have nonprofit vacant, and then we have a total of 1, 2, 3. We have another seat we could open.
So we would be recruiting for 2, a nonprofit and a member at large.
That's correct.
Okay.
And if anybody is planning on failing, which would be not cool, let me know right now, or else I will make you feel bad.
Opening, there may be opportunities for them to serve the committees. Yeah.
Yes. And we do have, I believe, a few of them who would be interested in moving up to full member as well. So especially the development committee, if anybody could bring me a development committee chair, that would be great. Don't tell them how much work that'll be. Just be like, no, development committee is easy. Don't worry about it.
No, and that to that point, that's going to be a really important position moving forward because it's a development committee that's going to work largely on the housing production strategies. So this is, I would say, in the time of the development committee's existence, the work that is about to start is probably the most critical, important work that committee will do or has done to date.
Yeah, we could probably rename it the housing strategy.
We could, yeah.
Do it all from that, but that will be where we will be doing the direct outreach to help the cities and communities do their work.
Right.
To show what we can bring. And
yeah.
So if you really want to put some time and elbow grease into this housing crisis, that'd be a great place to sink it into. So if anyone is interested, come talk to me, you send me an email, and we'll start putting a team together.
Is there?
Yes, I will provide some finance committee updates. One is that Dave has requested a presentation from the county regarding the Fund 122 budget. And Sarah and I put a request in for someone to come and speak to the Housing Commission at the next meeting. So in July, that will be part of our meeting, is getting a full report on how our money is, where it is, and how it's doing.
Right. So that would be from the treasurer's office. So if not, we can do it. But ideally, I think especially with the more technical questions about the fund and statutes related to the treasurer's office and management of that fund, getting someone from the treasurer's office is ideal.
I think so too, especially the cleanup of I think getting the public safety element
separated.
And yeah, I think it's really important that everybody have a clear understanding of that. I know that is something the finance committee has asked for a long time. So I'm very happy to deliver that. I think that's the only finance committee update that I'm gonna dive into today.
Legislative, we had several meetings since last month. We will probably have just kind of a final update in July on where we ended up. I want to thank Michelle for rallying the troops last month in Parker's absence, trying to get public testimony made for Tillamook Commons.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I have the name right. And that was super helpful. We'll see where that lands. We had Trevor, and he's probably going to be stepping down. He's been on our legislative committee since we started, and he's been just a wonderful resource. Just life is getting busy, and being a lobbyist, it's hard to pull away during legislative session to come fill us in.
Yeah.
So we're kind of slim pickings right now. We're down to 2 members, so we will be hopefully we'll have some great people come apply and be part of the commission and that have a legislative background. So we're going to have a final update in July of where the bill's landed, and then we will be on hiatus until the short session and will be January 26th.
Yeah, and I'll just add kind of a finance and legislative update. We did we did a great job at testifying for the opportunities we had to bring home some money. And between now and the 18th, I believe it is, we will start to know what sort of funding is going to be available both for like infrastructure and to see if any of our specific projects have gotten legislated. Fingers crossed, this is the waiting time that is visible to just sort of nothing we can do, nothing I can do. I have to wait for the call.
I think the numbers that we, correct me if I'm wrong, I recall hearing in this Ways and Means legislation, and allocation of lottery dollars, right? That were, that this Tillamook Bay Commons, that they're having for. There are 500 million to allocate and a total of 2 billion requested. And I listened to a lot of the testimony from a lot of the projects while I was waiting to testify. And they're all, you know, very worthwhile for the most part projects. But I do think that us showing up the way we did and the way that it rolled out with the public testimony itself, with having multiple people tweet up, that then having Parker and Steve, because they only gave 2 minutes total for the oral testimony. But we had multiple people and we deferred to just those two, but I think it looked really good. And I was listening in and the guy that was moderating the time, he was like, wow, okay, thank you. Where all the other ones were like, so-and-so, you're next.
Yeah.
Thank you. So-and-so, you're next. Thank you. And so I was like,
It's always a good sign.
yeah, thank you.
Oh, wow, that is a lot of you. You can decide who's speaking
Yeah,
right now.
like super organized.
Yeah.
But then we looked like super organized.
And I'd also like to update that the ask that was made was not just for Tillamook Bay Commons, it was actually for the entire nonprofit, which finally has a name, and it is Oregon Coast Housing Group. And they have now they have paid for an expedited IRS determination, and they expect to have their IRS letter in August, is when the IRS said that they can expect it for having paid for the expedition. They have their Oregon EIN, or they have their EIN number, they have the Oregon nonprofit status, and they also went and took a short-term loan out to satisfy our contingency for their second distribution of their payment. And so they got a short-term loan, kind of high percentage on their own dime to put the earnest money in for the land. So they are now fully under contract, which allowed us to make the second distribution of $40,000 to them that we had contingent on that. That combined with the remaining contracts being written and sent out, all of the funds have been vouchered from our last housing cycle, which is about twice as fast as I did last year. So I'm happy with me, but about twice as long as it should be. And so one of my goals for the next cycle is to 30 days after we finish up our decisions and everything, I want to have all of the money out the door, all at once, not have this drag out, and then we can get back to work on other things, or not maybe more, but other important things. So that's kind of a couple of updates all rolled into one there.
If I can just say too, I feel like that it's not so much the housing nonprofit itself, but the demonstration project that it represents for the state of Oregon as a workforce housing solution. And I think that case was made very adeptly in those 2 minutes. And I do think that that might be the difference maker, because we're trying to present a model that can be replicated and that can be sustainable, which is the holy grail of what we're trying to do and has been so elusive.
Yeah.
Corin, for your benefit, and for anybody who might need to recall, what this nonprofit is set up to do is to build 500 doors of workforce housing in Tillamook County. And as long as that is their goal of their nonprofit, they need to be demonstrating and reporting that they are moving towards that, which means that right now, even though their first project has yet to be fully financed and start to build, they're already looking at projects 2 and 3 because that is the requirements of their nonprofit. So they are already starting to line up more. And unlike affordable housing, middle income housing puts off a little bit of a return, where affordable just doesn't. It just kind of pays the bills and it fills up maintenance coffers. In this case, the amount of return that will come back, plus the equity that we are trying to start this project at, which is like 60% paid for, essentially, means that in 2 years, they'll be able to borrow against their current project, plus their income level, and they'll be off to a second project. And from there, this nonprofit just continues to feed itself and pay for itself to go. So the more money we get to this project now, it is compounding return. So it's compounding interest return. So the lower the debt load this project starts with, the sooner we get our next project, and the sooner we get the next project, and the sooner they complete their 500-door mission. So just to help you guys understand why this one is getting some extra push right now, it's because you only get to invest early once. So this is our chance to really send something that can be replicated statewide and be an enduring long-term driver of housing production.
Jill, do you have any outreach update?
Just that our focus areas are Senate Bill 406, the Housing Production Solutions Fund awardees, and just highlighting those as they roll out and continue their progress. We're also going back and highlighting progress of prior awarded, to just have some success stories to showcase and keep people excited. And this is very intentionally to reduce the number of Fs.
Perfect. Love it. Thank
That's
you.
all I'm gonna say about that. But also, I just want to shout out to the Tillamook County Newsy, Chelsea Yarnell, has been partnering with us to do some targeted communications, and she shared a really great article about Jeff Wong and his project. And so we're actively trying to cultivate new content, but also partner content that we can share out to keep that positive but fact-based sharing going out. So once this report is finalized, we'll do the same thing with this that we're currently trying to do with Central 406 information. Unless anybody has anything.
Parker, do you have any updates on the development from
The
here?
development committee would like a chair. So, please, reach out to find me a development committee chair. Let's bring somebody on, or let's bring somebody in as an ex officio. I don't think our rules prevent us from having an ex officio chair, but it does require that we have at least one member of the housing commission at the meeting. So if anybody would like to talk to me about the development committee, if you want to be a part of it, we're going to kind of try to retool it to be directed towards the housing production strategies that we will need to do. And we will be reforming, I am estimating, sometime between August and September to get that work starting to prep.
Right, because the grant for so we're going to go for another grant from DLCD to get a consultant on board to help us start and do this work. And because of 406, we get priority with other communities that are part of middle housing when we ask for money, which is awesome. But that grant is due August 1st. So, and then they will do the awards after that. So that is something else. And we're going to look at some intergovernmental agreements with the cities, because that will be a region-wide approach, which really also ties in nicely to the H&A in terms of the number of units needed. So it's gonna be getting a chair by August and September would really be ideal.
Yeah. And then I have one other bit of announcement to share that is both development and finance. I can finally comfortably and safely say that the CERTA grant money is back. And we have an IGA coming that we'll get in place at the end of the month, and early to mid-July, we will be able to actually begin that program. So that's remind you guys that it's $3.6 million, and it's $20,000 per space efficient housing. We have negotiated and whittled down the requirements to make it as broadly applicable as possible. And I want you to know the war I went to get ADUs to be able to be incorporated into this. And so I don't know where all this lands. It's a competitive process still. There will be a consultant that they've brought in to do the work for us, essentially. Yeah. But we still get to keep the admin money, so that's rad.
So this year then,
yeah,
between that the brownfield money, the DLCD grants, we're upwards of $5 million that we are bringing into this county to help us with our housing needs.
And that's before the
amazing.
legislation that comes back.
That comes back. Yeah.
If we got everything we asked for, we would be up above 11, 12, $13 million somewhere in there. With all the infrastructure asks that I know are in there as well. So we've got some powder in the keg. Thank you. I'll take that ADU war.
Are we gonna, have any updates on the raw property the next meeting?
Yes.
That's a good question. Thank you
Yes,
for asking.
I can say that we are nearly finished with the consultant. We've asked them to make some revisions, and our on-site sanitation specialist will be joining them in the field to do a little bit more work
This week.
this week.
Yeah.
So kind of just missed it on bringing it to this meeting, but next meeting we will get the full report, and we will take it from there.
And on that note, our next meeting is July 3rd.
It is.
That's the day before 4th of July. At 9 a.m. So play everybody can hold off of their holiday celebration.
Bring your sparklers.
They've already had jury duty.
Parker.
I thought we needed some brightness in our door.
Like, was it? The water bottle base was a dead giveaway that I was.
Never good not you looking, right?
All right. In that case, it is 6 minutes before.
Yeah.
11 o'clock.
Thank you.
Yeah, July 3rd. Yay.